Hello, and welcome back to Day 2 of THWACKcamp 2018. We hope that you found all the sessions yesterday useful and fun. And if this is your first time at THWACKcamp, welcome. But hopefully you spent most of yesterday in sessions and chatting live with SolarWinds product managers, senior support engineers, THWACK members, and MVPs, head geeks, and our industry expert guests. Your questions in chat and all of the live conversations were amazing. And as always, it's a privilege for us to catch up with you in real time. And in just a minute, we're going to kick off today by exploring one of your most commonly asked about topics, tools. SolarWinds product experts can and do regularly talk about tools, especially how to get the most out of the IT tools that you already have. And if your takeaway from THWACKcamp, SolarWinds Lab, support webinars, the Customer Success Center Quick Starts, or live training is, wow, I didn't know all of that was in there, well, that's great. But even better, and based on what I'm watching in the live chat again this year, is that you're helping each other solve difficult issues specific to your domains. And with over 150,000 registered THWACK members, there aren't too many challenges in IT, even the rarest root causes that someone on THWACK hasn't already seen too. And that's why you need to be logged in before the technical session starts, why you'll want to be logged in. Not because you can earn enough THWACK points to go shopping in the THWACK store, maybe pick up a t-shirt or socks or something else cool, but because chances are that you'll make new connections during THWACKcamp. As Denny, our SVP of Product Marketing, mentioned yesterday in our opening keynote, THWACK was built by you. Its camaraderie is built on your common experiences of delivering services, and moreover, a common desire to make users happy and drive your businesses forward. And because you do that every day in the office, at THWACKcamp, you make connections that last. So if you're not already logged in, be sure to click the login button before the beginning of the next session. And there's a button on the event webpage where you can do that. It only takes a minute, and you can earn up to 5,000 points. That's almost a t-shirt's worth of THWACK points. Attend sessions and fill out their surveys, and pretty soon you'll be just about there. Just check out the FAQ on the THWACKcamp page if you want to know more. And of course, we'll be doing live giveaways throughout the day in both tracks, and you'll need to be logged in for those. So, tools. The favorite voltmeter, screwdriver, and hopefully not sledgehammers of IT. We all have a favorite tool, and I know over the years I've had software that I simply could not live without, and it was usually determined by my career phase at the time. Desktop management tools, Wireshark, Putty, PowerShell, SQL Management Studio, or more recently for me, Chef, Jenkins, or even Git. Okay, sometimes you do need a sledgehammer, but we're admins. We do whatever it takes. But maybe more important than the tools that you use is what you know. And I know that seems obvious, it's what you know. Except that when you need to solve a problem right now, especially something which only infrequently occurs. And in that case, as admins, we're okay with a little black magic, or at least a black box tool that fixes a problem so that we can move on to something else. And although the majority of our THWACKcamp presenters again this year are expert SolarWinds team members, we're fortunate also to be joined by several industry experts, all of whom have discovered, evaluated, and juggled dozens of tools during their careers. Phoummala Schmitt, Theresa Miller, Tim Crawford, James Green, Karen Lopez, Mandy Hubbard, and Sandy Hawk all are accomplished IT operations experts who know a thing or two about tools. And like all of us, they have favorites that they can't live without. And I wanted to ask each of them a couple of questions. First, what's been their go-to tool in a pinch, and why? But also second, what have they learned that saved them in a tough spot or accelerated their careers as technology professionals? And their answers were both really interesting and I think mirror the recommendations that you make to each other every day on THWACK. It just doesn't seem to matter exactly what we do as technology professionals. The tools that we use and the skills that we learn are remarkably similar. So let's hear from our guests. And we'll start with Phoummala Schmitt, Cloud Ops Advocate for Microsoft. So Phoummala, like so many of our viewers, you started as a sysadmin. So thinking back, what is the #1 tool that has saved your bacon? Maybe either the greatest number of times over the years, or maybe once, just really spectacularly.
Till this day, it still saves me. Fiddler and Wireshark. I mean, those are just handy tools to have. Oftentimes, I get issues where, we can't connect, or the Skype meeting isn't connecting, or the server isn't talking to this other server. Well,
it cuts out all the mystery to actually see the packets.
It does. You install it, and you're like, well, that's why you can't talk, because this port isn't open, and it can't talk to this, or it's actually, talking on this port, and this whole VLAN's been blocked. It's amazing. I've used it so many times. I actually tweet about, stuff is getting real when the Exchange administrator installs Wireshark or Fiddler.
Do you find a lot of times using that tool that you start doing maybe less networky things and more system or even application level analysis, like you start looking at headers or you start looking at something else that's specific to that installation or that instance, not even sort of the technology?
It actually depends on the situation. I've run across where, yes, it is the application that's the problem. And I've run across where it's the network.
It's never the network.
I know, it's never the network. It's almost, I'd say 60% of the time, it is the network for me, because it's my tool to say, okay, we have an issue with the network. It's not talking. Because at that point, I've already ruled out there's an application issue. When I start bringing out Fiddler or Wireshark, I'm talking, okay, there's something physical that says you cannot talk, or there's something else, whether it is a security layer, AV, there's something there that says this application can not talk to this other application, or they can't talk to their friends within the cluster. And that's where Fiddler and Wireshark, they're just, they're nice, handy tools to have. And you don't have to be a network person to run it. You can run it and give it to the network person to analyze. Because I'm not a hardcore network person, but you can see when something's not talking. It's bright red. Hey, it's denied or blocked. It says it right there.
All right, so Fiddler and Wireshark, certainly helpful. I've relied on them many, many, many times. But what's the number one thing that you learned that has saved you?
Oh, good one. Never make assumptions. Because once you start assuming, you could assume the wrong thing. And then your project just completely gets, it just explodes right in your face. And don't assume that another, administrator knows something. I've made that assumption a couple times, and it's burnt me. So now I say tactfully, to make sure that I don't offend somebody, that, if I'm giving instructions, just to make sure that I'm not assuming that everybody knows, because somebody in the team may not know, and they're just not saying, hey, I don't know that, because they don't want to look like the idiot on the team, which you're never the idiot if you don't know something. You just come out and say it, but some people don't want to say that. So never assume that everybody knows what you're talking about.
So would you say the goal is a open curiosity, not so much skepticism?
Yes. Yeah. And just asking questions and learning, but never assuming that everybody knows, or assuming something. If I don't know something, I'm going to ask. Or if I'm assuming something, it always backfires on me. So if I'm going to assume that, this admin wants this to be done. And in the back of my head, I go, you know what? I'm going to shoot her an email just in case. And I'm going to say, hey, I'm thinking that you might want this particular action with your calendar item. But is that, I just want to confirm, is this the case? And oftentimes they come back, oh no, I actually wanted this. I'm like, oh, thank God I, didn't assume that, because, that just, all sorts of chaos would have happened. So
the tendency not to assume, is that something that comes as a part of the development of your other skills as a senior technologist, or is it something that's just an innate part of who you are when you're working with systems?
I think it's a little bit of both. Naturally, sometimes we want to assume. So you have to basically teach yourself not to do it, because we feel like everybody, something that's basic, everybody should know that. Not necessarily. So you do have to teach yourself to kind of step back and ask those right questions. It comes back to the soft skills and communicating, because making assumptions is ineffective communication.
Where do you find that those most critical things that you've learned fall on that scale of formal learning versus sort of situational on-the-job learning? Do they tend to be predominantly more something that you learned on the job, or are there things that you actually learn in a more formal environment that are equally useful?
Probably a little bit of both, but I think more on the job. I think a lot of it you do have to read into your coworkers and kind of assess the situation a little bit, but My son actually is in college for computer information systems, and I tell him all the time, never assume. That's the one thing I want you to learn. Never assume. Never assume that your professor wants you to do this. Never assume that the systems are going to work like this. And so he's taken that to heart. And so he's trying to learn not to assume and ask those right questions. And it's really great to see him kind of break out of that habit of, okay, well, shouldn't it work like this? It's supposed to work like that. No, don't assume, dear. Mm-hmm. And he's been finding out, especially with computer systems, that sometimes they just don't always go the way that you want them to.
Yeah, well, and especially in a future where people who with a lot of cognitive bias are going to be competing against AI that won't have that same bias. And so that the people who will be the most valuable are the ones that don't take anything for granted and don't arrive with preconceptions about what's causing an issue with the system.
Yeah, those preconceptions have burnt me before, and have burnt others. So keep an open mind, ask questions. It may be a simple thing, but ask those questions, because you just never know what you're going to learn, rather than making assumptions.
Theresa, you have an interesting career path, right? You've ended up being a practice leader, but before that, and before technology, you actually started as a trainer and then got into technology that way. So you've been exposed to many, many different technical tools over the years. What's the number one tool that has absolutely saved you more than anything else?
So since the introduction of PowerShell, that really has been the tool that can save the day. And the beautiful thing about it now is that almost every application that's out there has integrations with it. So it doesn't really matter which application you're working with anymore. You have it as a tool. In the early days, that wasn't the case. Like, it was just Exchange.
Right.
In the beginning. So.
Well, and it's interesting because you hear so many people talk about there's an API that's available, or there's some interface, or actually just use PowerShell, or there's a snap-in that you can go ahead and apply. And it's interesting when people kind of come to it and they start experimenting with it and they realize this thing is every bit as good as any online scripting tool that's been available in Linux forever and ever and ever in Unix systems. It is really, really powerful.
Yep. So it's been amazing for automation. It's amazing for quick cleanups, especially in the Microsoft stack. Email messages, you get that frantic call where somebody sent something they shouldn't have and wished they could recall it. Well, message recall doesn't usually work very well.
Right.
So you get that emergency call to take care of it, right? And it's always PowerShell. That's the easiest way to do it.
Or it's a problem where it's an error that was never anticipated by the vendor, and so you're going to, the solution is go in and make a change to an account, but you're going to have to do that to 20,000 accounts, and so doing that manually would be impossible. So PowerShell is great for that.
Absolutely. The other area I've found it very useful is with Citrix. Once they finally introduced the SDKs for that, being able to just do simple things like system uptime and things like that, which are actually extremely valuable in a Citrix environment when things lock up, servers don't reboot necessarily correctly. You need to know if you have a server in a strange state, and that's the best way to do it. So lots of really, really great saving graces from PowerShell over the years.
All right, so my second question is, what's the number one thing that you've learned during your career that has saved you? Maybe several times, or maybe just once, really in a big way.
So it really comes down to, when troubleshooting, where the answer is. There's not one single source of truth. And a way that I like to say it is, the answer is wherever it is. You really have to do the research and find it out. It's not always going to be you're going to call a vendor for the answer. It's not always going to be the vendor's website. It could be a tech community. It could be Twitter. It could be LinkedIn. And so you really need to take the time to get your research skills ramped up. Research skills will go a long way in troubleshooting in IT.
It's sort of a joke almost that the better you are at Googling, the better that you're going to be with technology. But that really is true. Especially Do you find that some of the most useful information that you get is actually designed from the outset to be self-service oriented? So to put it out in a user community, for example, or as part of a vendor's quick start site, for example, that looking for help and information where you can get it 24 hours a day? Do you tend to rely on those sites more, or is it that one person who's in the APAC time zone and I know that I can reach out to them and get an answer from Slack, but only between certain hours?
So again, the answer is where it is. It can be anywhere. I do not have a single source of truth. You did make a good point, though, about let's say it's an exchange issue, I might start looking at the Microsoft communities, but I also might lean on some of my industry peers.
Right.
So it does very much depend on the issue, but it's never in the same place. There's not one website, there is not one search engine, there is not one social media tool. You have to be very open and receptive to taking the time to look.
So you would encourage our viewers to just make sure that they are always open-minded, not to fall into the trap of thinking that there's this one oracle of truth, but that the answer could always come literally from anywhere, and you're more successful as a result.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So Tim, not just as a former CIO, but someone who spends a lot of time counseling CIOs and their organizations that eventually do get down to an awful lot of people who are admins, they've been in operations for a really long time. I mean, they all have ideas about tools, right? The most effective tool, and a lot of them really are passionate about a particular tool. Do you feel like one of the things in selecting a tool that a lot of times we sort of forget as technology professionals is to think about the customer?
Absolutely. But let's give the IT folks that are working really hard a little bit of credit here. Most IT folks, including CIOs, don't have direct access to the company's customers.
Right.
They don't know what the customer looks like. And unfortunately, that's a real problem moving forward. And that's starting to change, but very, very slowly. It does create a disadvantage for folks within the organization because they're even further away from what the customer looks like. But probably the best thing to do is put yourself in the shoes of what a customer would look like. If you're a retail company, what if you're a consumer of that product, right? If you're a manufacturing company, put yourself in the shoes of that particular customer's shoes, but how they think about the product and how they engage with the company. What are the different ways that they engage with the company? And that's at least a starting point for folks to work with, even if they don't have direct access to the customer to be able to interact and talk with them and really understand what works for them and what doesn't work for them. So there are other ways, you just have to get a little more creative.
So it's not just, I'm a firefighter and this is the most effective axe, right? If you're in IT and you're just putting out fires all day, you sort of think about selecting tools based on what makes your job in the moment easier, but sort of expanding that thought to think about how this is going to actually affect my customers who are consuming my applications.
Yeah, here's the problem that goes with that, because that is what we used to do. And that's what a lot of companies still do today. The problem is you head down the path of solving that problem and you're just in firefighter mode and you're thinking you're doing the best thing for your company and you're just fighting tooth and nail and you're fighting and you're fighting and you're fighting to solve the problem. And next thing you know it, you look around and you go, where is everybody? And you realize that you have been so heads down on solving a particular problem and yet the company's gone in a different direction. And then you're kind of left out in the cold, so to speak. And so it's important to always have context into what you're doing. And also the other piece with the firefighting that often doesn't happen is it's good to have management involvement in those firefighting situations because you have the people who are heads down into solving a problem, but you need some overlay to provide a little bit of air cover. So if there's ever a time where it's like, you know what, pull the ripcord, we need to stop going down this path, we need to go a different direction, there's someone that has that purview that can be able to pull that ripcord, and that's a good thing for everybody.
Okay, so here's a trickier question. What is the most useful thing for everyone in IT that's part of the ops organization to really understand? What's the one piece of learning that can be more valuable than anything else?
You know, years ago, and I came up on the opposite side of the house when I started my career in IT. It used to be about the technology and understanding how we can leverage that technology to the nth degree, right? Get really deep into it, build a lot of expertise around it, whether it was network, servers, storage, other components of software, management software. Now, it's more important to understand a couple of things. And I think it starts with, how does your company make money? And how does your company spend money? And once you start to understand those dynamics, and even for someone further into the IT organization that might go, wait a second, hold on. I'm a technologist. I'm way in the depths here.
I don't have a budget.
I don't have a budget. I'm not a manager. I'm an individual contributor. I'm used to kind of twiddling the bits and plugging things in and making it work. The important thing about understanding how your company makes money and spends money and understanding what your customer looks like is it gives you perspective. So that when it is time to talk about a given technology, you have a context in which to have that conversation. Because at the end of the day, it's still the individual contributor that works with those tools day in, day out, that needs to understand how can I promote or otherwise be able to convince my manager or supervisor that, yes, we need to invest in this particular technology. And so understanding that business context provides them with the fuel, with the ammunition they need to be able to say, you know what, we need to go in this direction versus that direction. And so the first thing I'd suggest anyone in IT do, regardless of whether you're at a senior level or a more junior level, doesn't matter, understand what your company looks like from a financial standpoint, right? How it makes money, how it spends money, and what your customer looks like.
Mandy, as a developer, you've used dozens of different tools. It depends on application type, architecture, language. What's something that you really rely on?
Well, first of all, I'm a developer, but I am a quality leader. I've always worked in quality assurance, and the code I write is to test production code. The tool that I'm most rely on right now and have for the past several years is Jenkins. I like to be able to script all of my builds with the pipeline script. It allows me to run automated tests in a reliable way, and it continuously integrate and continues to deploy and deliver, and that's the single largest impact on the quality of the applications I've been writing and testing the past few years. And it doesn't really matter what type of application, what language you're using, where you're deploying. I find time and time again, this is the tool that gets me where I need to go no matter what environment I'm working in.
So here's your second question. What have you learned over the years that you can count on to get you out of a tough spot?
I've learned not to get too attached to any tool or any language and to be adaptable. You might be writing and testing in a language at one company and you move to another company and they're writing software in a completely different language or they have a different set of tools. It's all the same. We're all writing software applications and there are lots of tools to use it. And just not getting attached to say, you know, I'm a Ruby developer. That's what I do. I'm a developer. I'm a QA engineer. Whatever environment you've got, I can do this job in your environment, and then you adapt and don't get attached or define yourself by the tools that you use. So you've been asking everyone else this question, what's your favorite tool?
I think code is my favorite tool.
Code's not a tool. Code is a language you use to write tools.
Okay, hear me out. IDEs are a tool. I think libraries are a tool. And so when people think about code, when I say code is a tool, I don't mean the mechanics of what actually creates code. I think it's about learning to translate what you know, your expertise, into something that is executable in your absence. Because I don't think a lot of people are worried that they're going to kind of automate themselves out of a job. And I mean, you know, the reality now is the better you are at automating what you do makes you more valuable. I mean, if you're an SRE, you're getting paid now to do that. And so you see that all the time now with admins who've been working in IT for 20 years and they learn how to code a little bit and you see a light bulb go on. So it's not so much the artifacts that you create, it's learning how to code, having that eureka moment of, I'm going to get to do something this weekend. I'm going to deploy during a work hour instead of on the weekends. That's the power of using code as a tool.
Okay, fine, I'll give you that.
All right, Sandy, I'm really looking forward to your answer to this question. When we think of tools, especially from a security perspective, what's something that you've been able to rely on throughout your career? Maybe it's something that you're maybe sentimental about, or it's been able to something you've been able to rely on that's really been helpful. What do you really like in terms of tools?
As a security professional with my years of experience in security, one thing I've learned is a tool, there is no silver bullet tool, as much as we want it to be the case. And kind of a strange answer would be Excel. Excel spreadsheets are being used for all kinds of tools when you think about it, whether you're in the HR department or you're in IT. I think every single probably employee uses Excel for one reason or another. But when I really think about tools, I sort of am reminded of our reliance on technology when common sense sometimes is the best approach. And it's not just to put all your faith in one tool or technology, but think about how you're using that tool or technology so that you're protecting your data and the company and your customers.
Okay, so then the other question is, what is something that you've learned along the way that you've been able to count on, either getting you out of a tough spot or maybe has been just strategically valuable, especially with setting security policy, for example, where it's not just a checkbox, where it's going to be ongoing? What's something that you learned along the way that you've been able to count on over and over again?
One thing I've noticed is that relationships really drive business. So you know the OSI layer, the 1 through 7 layer model? The 8 is the part I think security has a huge role to play in terms of the human factor. Just remembering that we're people, that we need to treat ourselves and our relationships very seriously. And I've often heard people say that you make decisions based on emotions and then use logic to explain why you made that decision. And I think that really plays a huge role in security because we want to encourage people to think about why they're doing something or why someone's asking them a question. So I think if we keep remembering that we're all human our human connections sometimes drive the best business decisions. So I think things like trust and transparency, those kind of like soft skills, if we can bake that into the corporate culture, I think we're just going to be so much better, more further along to protecting the organization, to protecting our data, protecting our client relationships.
How can administrators kind of get past, I think we have a tendency to go right for OSI 1 through 7, right? A lot of people are kind of uncomfortable at layer 8. How can we be a little better about making sure that we're thinking about relationships, especially if we want to have security where the policy is actually effective?
Well, hopefully you can be inside an organization where you feel like they trust you and there's transparency. And so when you make a mistake or you're just sometimes awkward or socially unaware of something, if you have the freedom and trust of your company where you can be your true authentic self, I think the company is going to do a whole lot better than if you're feeling like, oh, I can't ask that question or I can't say that thing because I'm so afraid of what will happen or how I'll be treated. I think if you create a culture of trust and transparency, you'll get the best best out of your workforce.
Karen, you have a unique experience, right? You not only have been a technology professional for a really long time, but you still...
I'm experienced.
You're experienced, but there's something in you that likes to dive in as a smoke jumper. Like you like to take on troubled projects and really pull things. You sort of bring strategy, but also hands on the keyboard, virtuosity to it.
Yep.
So you've worked with a million different types of tools over the years. Give us an example of a tool that maybe you just love or has saved you or you just really, for whatever reason, have an affinity for.
Oh, wow. You're asking me to pick my favorite child. Like, how do I do this? I'm a gadget geek, like every electronic, every tool, love that. I think about it's really a system of tools. And because I'm on troubled projects and juggling priorities, it ends up being my to-do list, the thing I love and hate. I have to have organization.
Okay.
Like, someone wants a meeting with me. If I don't get a meeting notice, the meeting's not going to happen. So for me, the tools that allow me to be successful in my job are the ones that organize my tasks and my day. And that's kind of a lot of people think that's a given. Like, we hardly even think of them as tools now. We have our phones, we check our emails, we do all this stuff. But the real thing is, in my world on trouble projects, almost always the problem is no one's writing anything down. So whether it's a modeling tool or a task or a plan, nobody's writing it down.
Just accumulating more technical debt and not everybody.
And they don't even know it,
right,
because there's no tool to report that they're behind. So it's really the use of tools in a way that is what I have to live by.
So all right, then the second question is, what is something that you learned that you've been able to apply over and over again to solve big problems?
Wow, so many lessons learned, trust me. Like for me, I'm biased because I'm a data person, but I think every problem we have in life is a data modeling problem.
Okay.
Not like drawing a model, but having terminology that everyone understands what we mean, maybe with context, that a group trying to work together under big challenges needs to make sure that they can communicate in a way that isn't overly complex and that doesn't carry extra weight just to try to understand what someone's talking about or has a problem with. So getting that clarity is really important.
So sort of the Apollo problem, we have there's one criticism of that period of NASA where 3-letter and 4-letter acronyms for everything appeared, and we continue in IT to this day.
Yes, jargon.
But you knew what it meant because it was very specific.
And NASA was really good about making cute ones as well. So SCUBA was a project, not just an underwater technology. Those kind of NEMO for their training.
Right.
Yes, there's that. And it's not just the TLAs, the acronyms. It's also just nouns, words that we can't even agree about. Even in the data modeling world, where we're all supposed to have a single term with a single definition, we're all awful about it because we like to be creative. But if we have that agreement, doesn't matter if it's everyone else's agreement, we can move forward.
Yeah, you can use one word in a trouble resolution message flow, and everybody knows what that means.
That's it.
So James, you're spending most of your time now really consulting and especially helping IT solve real problems, like strategic problems, to think about solving problems in new ways. But once upon a time, just like all the rest of us, you spent all your time on the keyboard actually solving real problems, the kind of problems that make people panic, especially leadership in the middle of the night. You used a set of tools. You came to rely on things that would really help you solve problems. So give me an example of maybe a tool that is still beloved to you, that's still helpful, that you think of fondly, that's helped you in the past really get out of some trouble.
Yeah, one of the things that I remember about being heavily in the trenches is there's a lot of context switching when something goes wrong. It's look at this, look at this, look at this. And of course, you got one person standing over each shoulder too, like, oh.
Yeah, that always helps.
Right?
It's like, when is this going to be solved? When I don't have to talk to you anymore.
Yeah, exactly. When you go away and let me think for a minute. But one of the things I remember being really helpful when I was in those situations is I use a tool called Royal TS, Royal TSX, I think, for my Mac, to manage all of my connections to different parts of the infrastructure. And it took me a while to even fully utilize it. I started using it just for RDP, but I found they also do SSH, and you can put a web page in there, so you can load an admin console. And so eventually I got to the point where I had this, I don't know what you call it, session file thing built out that had all of my connections to everything I might need at any given point in time. And when things got hairy, it was really helpful to be able to get to everything I needed fast using that tool.
So sort of let you accumulate technical knowledge in one place and immediately act on it.
Yep.
So what did you learn that was really helpful? I mean, obviously things like automation is helpful, make sure you're verifying your backups. Those are things that you learn that actually really will help your career. But what was something that you learned as an admin that you relied on over and over again in difficult circumstances?
Especially when things got difficult, the thing that I found to be most important was to learn what's really important to the people who are making decisions and focus on that above all else. Because as technical people, it's really easy to focus on things that seem really important and that I truly believe are important to do a good job at, but maybe aren't the thing that the people who are evaluating what I'm doing consider to be most important. And if you want to be really effective and work well with those people, the first step is to know, what do they really care about? And to some degree, you can get some forgiveness about all the rest if you make sure that you execute perfectly on the one thing that's most important to them.
So don't fall into the trap of doing what's easiest for IT, but instead what's best for the customer.
You may write the most beautiful, elegant script to solve a problem you've been having for 2 years, but if the problem that the business cares most about has gone unsolved while you did that, you're not going to get the praise you deserve. First step is to focus on what's important to the business. Once that's squeaky clean, then move on to things that make your life easier.
Aren't they great? I know that we get to hear them talk about specific technologies and make detailed recommendations in the THWACKcamp session tracks. But it's so interesting that they use, or at least started with, many of the same tools that we did. What's interesting in all these conversations is how they stress the importance of knowledge over the tools that they use. Solving complex challenges does start with what we know, but it's not about managing specific technologies. It's about learning, openness, leadership, communication, and courage. These are the skills that form the foundation of a long and interesting career in technology. And like you, they enjoy those moments of discovery and relief when new learning leads to utilizing tools fully. It turns out that many of our favorite tools aren't black boxes after all. They're actually open. There's rich documentation and training. We just never have time to fully explore them. But how can we? We spend all of our time fighting fires. And that is what THWACKcamp is all about. It's an immersion course in SolarWinds tools, but also the techniques that help regardless of how you monitor and manage your environment. Now, of course, for SolarWinds, because these products are mature and they've benefited from years of investment to serve the needs of 250,000 customers, it's impossible to learn all of them in a few hours, and that's okay. I remember one time when Destiny did a how-to for the SNMP monitor component in SAM, that's Server and Application Monitor. And at first I thought, well, why? SAM is all about monitoring packaged applications and custom data and Linux and APIs and things that applications care about. Let's please not go back to SNMP. But her example of executing a smart script for a wonky device that's going to be on the network forever? I didn't know you could do that. So hopefully again this year, you're having a similar experience, whether you're an essential member of your company's IT team or work with automation, cloud, and DevOps, or even if you manage the operations for others. We hope that you hear these experts saying one thing, that there's virtually nothing that IT and ops can't solve with a little learning, some great tools, and time. And I think that's the lesson about technology professionals that our business partners are beginning to take notice of, is that we can and do adapt. We work to overcome. Because technology professionals are, as we always have been, dedicated to making other humans happy by applying technical skills. And the secret that many outsiders don't know is that as professionals, we don't seek to merely meet SLAs, we want to delight our customers. And so the tools that we choose are personal. They are how we deliver what our businesses need. And they're also part of our superhero costumes, which we do keep carefully tucked out of the way where no one can see them. All right, I'll be back live on chat in just a moment, and we'll be starting our session tracks. Please make sure that you're logged into THWACK, and I'll see you there, along with the experts that we just heard from, SolarWinds staff, head geeks, and of course, our amazing THWACK members, you. As always, it's great to have you with us at THWACKcamp, and we hope that you have another amazing day.